Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to episode 100 of Success Through Failure. This is obviously a special episode. I can't believe that I made it to 100. It is, it's come a long way from episode number 1. I know quite a few of you have been with me since episode 1, or at least have gone back and started from episode 1. So thank you. I've had so many loyal listeners. And so I wanted to make this episode today special and share with you sort of some of the best ofs and some of my biggest lessons. Share with you the most recommended books, the most downloaded episodes, etc. So I do want to apologize for getting this out a little bit late. I was going to hold off and launch this next week. I did 2 episodes last week because I wanted to get the Mike Chandler episode out before he fought in Bellator 180. Awesome dude. If you haven't listened to number 99, guys, just a very real, humble champion. So definitely recommend that one. But I do want to share one quick personal thing before I get into the meat of this episode. You know, I spent end of last week, I spent about 24 hours in the car out of 60 hours, driving about 2,000 miles to go help a loved one. And it was a terrible, challenging ordeal, and it's far from over. But it was a really important thing for us to do, but the interesting thing was, it was the first time in 11 years that Allie and I, my wife and I, spent 2 consecutive nights alone. And we drove there, no kids, left them. They were with my mother-in-law, and we've always said for years that we don't have the time, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the babysitters, or whatever the case might be to pull it off. And my mother-in-law doesn't live in Charlottesville. She just happened to be in town, so we could pull that off. But when we really needed to go spend some time together dealing with the situation, unfortunately, we did, because it was urgent. But it's sort of a lesson of, it shouldn't take an emergency to prove that you can do something that's important but not urgent. You know, a lot of times when it's an urgent situation, we find ourselves able to do something. Maybe it's urgent that you lose 50 pounds right now because your doctor just said, you know, you're going to die if you don't. And then all of a sudden, boom, you start losing weight, right? You've never been able to do it for all these excuses you had your whole life, and all of a sudden something's an emergency or it's urgent and you're able to do it. So make sure you take the time to look at those things that you know that you need to do, the important things that you don't get to because you have some kind of excuse. You don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the whatever, but you know it's important. How can you make that happen right now? What if there was an emergency? Could you make that happen? Most likely the answer is yes. So I wanted to share that quick important lesson that I just kind of relearned last week. So on to the best of episode here. So I got a bunch of different ones that have kind of come to mind as I kind of look back through all my episodes. So let's get right into it here. First lesson is this: the biggest names. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to have an action plan made with all these because I'm going to refer to a bunch of different episodes, and some of these may pick your interest in, and you may want to go listen to or re-listen to some of these episodes. So I'm going to have links to all these, both the iTunes link, the direct download link, my website link, as well as the action plan from each of these episodes, all linked up in the one PDF, so you can find everything I'm talking about here. You can find in the action plan, jimharshawjr.com/action. Just grab the action plan for episode number 100. All right, here we go. So here's lesson number 1. The biggest names are not always the best guests, and they don't always provide the best stories. So, for example, Seth Goldman, I had him on episode 15. Episode 15 with Seth Goldman. He's the CEO of Honest Tea. You've probably seen it on the grocery store shelves. And he's a big name in his industry. But he's not a household name, far from it. But just an amazing story and amazing lessons from an amazing man. Talks about how to have balance and how to always find time to work out, even though he's a CEO of a $100+ million company. Another one, Lee Kemp. Lee Kemp is a huge name in the wrestling world. He's a three-time world champion. I should know the exact stats here, but big name. But he's episode 25, by the way, and just outside of the wrestling world, he's completely unknown or virtually unknown, but absolutely incredible individual. Holy cow, his backstory and what he was able to accomplish despite that, or maybe even because of his backstory, is just, it's unknown to most people, even in the wrestling world, who have known him for decades and known who he is. So Lee Kemp, amazing story, but again, not sort of a household name. Another one, Chris Duffin, episode number 40. Ridiculous backstory. This guy lived in a shack with no doors as a child, and he went on to college, be college educated, and his just broken and set world powerlifting records. Again, somewhat of a name in his community. He's created his own community, but Chris Duffin is just an absolutely incredible story. James Leith is another one, episode 55. He is the Director of Leadership Development for IMG Academy, which is basically, as he describes it, Hogwarts for athletes. And just a great story, a lot of really great lessons, especially if you're a coach of any sport or if you have kids. Just really powerful lessons in helping people understand that they are not what they are good at. That is not their only identity. If they're good at basketball or wrestling or piano or whatever the case might be, that's not their only identity. And James Leith really sort of gives some great lessons on how to do that. Another one, Steve Garland, last one here on the biggest names aren't always the best stories. Steve Garland, episode 67. Steve's a great friend of mine. He's actually given the single most amazing motivational speech that I've ever heard in my entire life. And that was at the FCA breakfast at the NCAA Wrestling Championships this past March 2017. Just an incredible backstory. I guess sort of the common theme between at least three of these five is the amazing backstory that some of these guys have. So those are some great episodes. Again, I will have the links to these episodes. You don't have to memorize them or write them down. I'll just have the links so you can listen to them easily if you download the action plan. Go to jimharshawjr.com/action. All right, next one. Number one, top most recommended books. Top most recommended books. All right, some of these, for the most part, you've probably heard of most of these. You may not have read all these, but these are ones that you have. If you haven't read them, definitely put them on your reading list. Here you go. Number one, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Second one is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a personal favorite of mine. Actually, both of those first two are personal favorites of mine. Third one, Mindset by Carol Dweck. Mindset by Carol Dweck. And I'm actually listening to that right now. And great book. I just, one sort of critique I'd have of it is that she really puts people into two buckets. You're either one or the other. When I believe it's more of a sliding scale. Even in certain areas of your life, you may feel growth mindset in one area, fixed mindset in another. So whether it's relationships or sports acumen or whatever, musical abilities, etc. So anyway, but I digress. Another one here, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And last but not least, Good to Great by Jim Collins. So those are the top most recommended books. I'll have links to those. You can buy those on Amazon. I'll probably make them affiliate links, meaning I'd make 50 cents or $1 or something like that if you do click one of those links and buy those. But neither here nor there. You can buy it by not clicking the affiliate link if you prefer. But just a heads up on that. All right. Next thing. How many names has my podcast had? How many names has my podcast had? This is a trivia question. So I'll give you 5 seconds to answer. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, here's the answer. 3. Started out wrestling with greatness. Changed it to wrestling with success because I thought wrestling was success. Not everybody wants to achieve greatness, but they all want success in their own version. And then I changed it to success through failure because a lot of people thought it was a wrestling only podcast, but it's not. Success through failure. All right, next one. Most exotic location where I interviewed somebody from. So not my location, because that's pretty much been either in my home or in my car or in a room in the library or something. But the most exotic location that I interviewed somebody from where they were at, and it is Bahrain. I interviewed Vice Admiral Kevin Donegan. Now, this is an under the radar episode. Kevin Donegan, episode 23. He is the commander of the Navy's Fifth Fleet. Okay, I didn't know what that meant. If you're in the Navy, we're in the Navy, you understand. The world is broken up into 6 zones, 6 areas, and he oversees one of those 6 areas. The Fifth Fleet is massive. I mean, thousands, probably tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know, tens of thousands at least of individuals and sailors and ships and personnel and gear and equipment, and it includes the Middle East. So obviously a very volatile area. But he oversees the Fifth Fleet. I mean, I can't believe he even took my ask. He's a friend of mine. I still couldn't believe he actually said, "Sure, Jim." And he was like a week on the job when he did this. So definitely, I mean, this dude's as incredible as a human being comes. Episode 23. I think that was back when it was still called Wrestling with Greatness. So if you want to dig into the archives. All right. Most helpful. I mean, this is a hard one to answer because, man, so many of these were so helpful. So many of the individuals that I've come to know have been just so helpful for me. Guys like Charlie Brenneman and Larry Hagner, Nee Shobo, just so many of these guys I've built friends with. Travis Macy. I shouldn't even start naming names because I'm going to leave out way too many. But Dr. Rob Gilbert. And Dr. Rob Gilbert, I interviewed him in episode 33. He's the host of the Success Hotline. The Success Hotline, he's left a voice message every day since 1992. He's left a motivational 3 to 5 minute voice message every day since 1992. Yeah, he's almost up to like 10,000. It's absurd. So it's part of my morning routine. One of the things that I do on my morning routine. And so let's see here. His phone number is 973-743-4690. And that's Dr. Rob Gilbert of the Success Hotline. And he's basically, he's helped me quite a bit with preparing for speeches that I've given. And just an incredible guy. If you listen to the end of his episode, he actually shares his other phone number. You can't call him on this number. This is the number for the messages. But he says, if you ever need help with a speech, call me. And you can actually call him. There's only one other person that I know of that has called him, and that's none other than Jake Herbert, who I had on episode number 3. Jake is an Olympian, a world silver medalist, and a good friend of mine. So anyway, I know Jake's taking Dr. Gilbert up on that. I don't know if anybody else has, but I highly recommend it. The guy knows his stuff. First repeat on my podcast. First ever repeat. Think about that for a second. If you're a longtime listener, episode 58 and episode 89, Josh Spodek. So I had him on a second time because he had just released his book, Leadership Step by Step. Just an incredible dude. Incredible guy. Can't say a whole lot. It was so practical, so helpful, so real. Everything he shared, it just really stuff you can implement today and how to make better relationships today, how to improve your leadership today. So really good stuff. Episodes 58 and 89, Josh Spodek. Next one here. My biggest, for the lack of a better term, biggest hero that I had on my podcast. And I there's so many. I mean, guys like Matt Lindland, he's an Olympic medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling, and Lee Kemp was another one I already talked about. But this guy is someone you would never expect. I've listened to his podcasts since, I don't know, I guess probably 10 years, since I had a window cleaning. I used to own a window cleaning and power washing business. And I remember driving to houses to do quotes, and I'd be listening to this guy's marketing podcast. His name's John Jantz of Duct Tape Marketing. Small business marketing guru, and he's not a wannabe guru. He's an actual real dude who shares pictures of himself catching bass fish on the weekend. I just saw him catching a fish yesterday on a post on Facebook. But he's just a real dude who is just an absolute guru. He's well known, very well known. He's hired by some of the biggest companies in the world to sort of interact with their communities of small business owners that they interact with, etc. It's John Jantz, episode 69. John Jantz of Duct Tape Marketing. Really powerful story there as well. So, all right. So, what is the actual most powerful story that I can say that someone shared on my podcast? Episode number 84, Jason McKenzie. Wow. His story is about his wife diagnosed with bipolar and just how that tore the family apart. He talks about his own shortcomings. He talks about how he struggled through that and good decisions and bad decisions that he made and how he came through that. And she eventually committed suicide, sadly. And it's just a heart-wrenching story, but it's a really powerful story about vulnerability and how just sort of sharing your story and trying to be a real person rather than trying to be somebody who you're not, and how that can really impact you. So Jason McKenzie, episode 84. All right, next one, most practical. Most practical. I'm going to have two for this one. One for the sort of manager, leader out there, and one for everybody else, including the manager and leader. Most practical. Michael Bungay Stanier, episode 80. And in episode 80, he shares his 7 questions that every manager should know from his book called The Coaching Habit. I'll share those 7 questions real quickly with you. So this is for a manager or a leader or a teacher or a coach. And these are questions that you can simply ask somebody to help them really think through their own challenge, whatever problem they're coming to you with, and kind of helping them think through that. You can ask. So here's the 7 questions. Number 1, what's the real challenge here for you? Number 2, simply quote, and what else? And what else? Number 3, what was most useful here for you? Great way to wrap up a meeting or a discussion. What was most useful here from you that you can take away? Number 4, good way to start out a meeting would be, or an appointment or meeting with somebody you're working with, is what's on your mind? Number 5, how can I help you? Number 6, what do you want? Okay, maybe they're sort of going off and trying to satisfy somebody else's needs or whatever. What do you want? And 7th and finally, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Anyway, those are the 7 questions from Michael Bungay Stanier, episode 80. Next, the other sort of most practical would be Carl Pills, episode 24. Man, if you're looking for just the nuts and bolts of how you need to eat, what like little adjustments you do to eat better, to feel better, to be healthier, to be more productive, to perform closer to your peak, to look better, etc. Carl Pills is your guy, episode 24. Next one. This is the one guest who I have in common with none other than maybe the biggest or one of the biggest podcasts ever out there, Tim Ferriss. One guest that I share with Tim Ferriss is Dr. Martin Gibala, episode 91. He talks about the 1 Minute Workout book, his book called The 1 Minute Workout, and sort of the power and impact of very short workouts. He sort of talks about 1 minute being sort of a little bit of a stretch, but actually, truthfully, they've actually shown results with a 1 minute workout. So anyway, great episode, Dr. Martin Gibala, episode 91. All right, most inspiring. This is a hard one, man. How could I pick the most inspiring? So many inspiring episodes. But I've got to go with Todd Stottlemyre, episode 94. Todd Stottlemyre was a 3-time World Series champion pitcher, Major League Baseball player. Just an incredible. I really wasn't sure what to expect from Todd, to be honest, when he came on. I talked to him beforehand and just didn't know if he was going to be that sharing. And man, was he powerful. I just loved his message. He actually has a book out too, so I'd recommend you check it out. So episode 94, Todd Stottlemyre. All right, biggest flub. All right, my biggest sort of screw up of an interview was with Mark Divine. And I interviewed Mark Divine in episode, let's see, which one was that? 45. And my Wi-Fi just kept going out. It kept crapping out. I was actually recording it from my car, which I've done with a lot of my podcasts. But my audio kept failing, and I just had to splice this thing together like so many times. He actually commented, he's like, man, good luck splicing this thing together, because our Skype kept dropping, and I had to splice it together to try to make it sound seamless. I don't know if it came across that way or not, but you may or may not have known. Episode 45. All right, favorite lessons. And so many of them, but I'm just going to share one with you here, because this really, I think, crystallizes every message from all of my guests, what I try to gain from them in terms of share a message of failure with me. I always ask them to share a message of a time when they failed. And Greg Warren, the comedian, episode, I should have had this one ready. Greg Warren is episode 18. And he's an All-American wrestler at Missouri. But he said this, he said, failure is not a predictor of success. Failure is not a predictor of success. And there's this sort of common sense, I guess, common knowledge theory out there that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And to some extent that's true, but it's not the only predictor of future performance. Failure is not a predictor of your future potential success, because, everybody I've interviewed on my podcast, I mean, they failed miserably, some of them. And so I highly recommend you taking that quote to heart. Failure is not a predictor of success. All right, last two I'm going to share here. One of the biggest things I've learned from all of these is this, the productive pause. And I've talked about this short period of focused reflection around specific questions that leads to clarity of action and peace of mind. And my goodness, we all want clarity of action and peace of mind. And so this productive pause is something that I've determined that nearly every single one of my guests, and it's almost uncanny. I ask them, tell me about a habit that you use that you feel has set you apart. And it's almost always some form of meditation or prayer or hiring a coach or doing a retreat once a year with my wife or journaling. It's some version of hitting the pause button on life, zooming out and making decisions when they're zoomed out, not when they're zoomed in, and not drifting through life. So this productive pause is the single greatest impact, single greatest lesson that I've learned and that I've tried to transfer to you through these episodes. And the last sort of biggest lesson that I've learned, and I'm going to share my most downloaded episode finally and last. It's going to be kind of the last piece here. Most downloaded episode. You're never going to guess who it is, by the way. All right, but the last biggest lesson I've taken is this: failure is ubiquitous. But you and I, we already know that, right? We know it logically, but emotionally, when we fail, we still feel like a failure at some level, right? Or even if you don't feel like you want to define yourself as a failure, you feel like there's this feeling, maybe I'm just not good at this, or maybe I should change course, or maybe I should try something different. Failure is ubiquitous, especially with the most successful people. And define success however you want. Financially, happiness-wise, how good of a parent they are, how good they were at sports, health, fitness, however you define success. Failure is ubiquitous in anybody's path to success. Yours, mine, and everybody else's. So understand that and keep coming back to this, my podcast, because that's the message that I'm sharing with people. And that I hope that you're able to share with people, not only, in your own life, but share, if you feel so inspired, share my podcast. I'm trying to grow the audience. If you've enjoyed these, share with other people. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. Send them a text message and say, hey, check out Success Through Failure. I'd appreciate that. So, all right, last but not least, what is the most downloaded episode of all time? You're never going to guess. It's a good one, though. It's a really good one. Way back in episode 32, Jason Bryant. Jason Bryant has created a life and a lifestyle around his passion. And it's one that nobody would think they could do. Jason Bryant, his whole life is, he's a wrestling journalist around amateur wrestling. Who can create a lifestyle, make a living doing this, right? He's pretty much freelance now. He has several podcasts, and he writes for some different outlets. He's an announcer. I mean, he's created his life around his passion, and he's done it for years. It's absolutely incredible. Nobody thought that somebody could do that around a non, professional type sport. It's not football, basketball, baseball, or hockey. It's wrestling, right? It's an Olympic sport, and he's created his life around this. So episode 32, Jason Bryant. I hope you check that one out. It's just a great story of how you can do that, and he's a great individual and a good friend. So I hope that brought you some insight. I hope that was fun. I'm going to have the action plan for this with listed out all these great episodes, so you can go, hey, I like this one, I like that one. You can click and select the ones that you like the most, and check out all the best of episodes here. Gosh, there's so many. I know, some of my guests who are also listeners, I'm sorry if I left you out, man. There are so many great episodes here. I just couldn't list them all. I could have come up with the best of for probably every single of the first 99 episodes. But I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please share and throw me a rating or review on iTunes. Haven't actually asked for that in months and probably a year or more. So I hope you consider leaving me a rating and review on iTunes, sharing this with a friend. It'd be so awesome if you did. Until next time, and for the next 100 episodes, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.